Welcome back to another episode with ByrdAdatto. And today we're going to talk about movies. And Michael, I don't know if you remember, there's a movie out there and there's a line in it that says, "They're here." Do you know what movie that is from?
I don't, Brad.
In 1982 is a movie called Poltergeist. And it's when the poltergeist comes in the house. And my little young age of 82, yes, I was alive back then, that scared the devil out of me pretty much. And so I thought a little bit of Poltergeist make sense for today, because today and I think maybe before we get into the question of the day, maybe we can introduce our special guest that's here with us.
Well, I think before we do that, we just have to pause and celebrate that you were able to get a movie fun fact into our video today.
Absolutely.
And with that, also welcome back one of our partners, Renee Coover. She speaks with us all around the country. Many of you already know her, and Renee spends a lot of time with employment-related issues, and I bet that's what we're going to talk about today.
That is a great idea, because when we're saying they're here, it's the concept of letting something back into your office. In this case, your employees. And just like everything else, most of your employees are going to be awesome. And when you bring them back, they're going to be excited. But just like the poltergeist, there's going to be moments in time of pure terror. And so today we're lucky to have Renee join us to talk about what are the things you consider to help prevent the poltergeist in the closet from coming out and wreaking havoc. So Renee, with that, I'd love to hear your thoughts about employees and what they should be considering as they come back to the office.
Yeah, thanks for having me, gentlemen. So good to be back. And today the focus is really on what we're seeing right now. So we, as offices are opening across the country, and businesses are starting to think about bringing their employees back wherever there is no shelter-in-place order. We're also, unfortunately, seeing a trickle in of both wrongful termination and discrimination claims from employees who were either furloughed, laid off, or terminated during the closure or during the pandemic. So right now, the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, has been receiving these claims from employees. Actually, just in Dallas last week, an employee filed a claim and alleged that she was wrongfully terminated after requesting to work from home because there was still a shelter-in-place order in place, and the employer, in response, terminated her. So she filed a claim alleging that she was pressured by her employer actually to violate the stay-at-home order and commit a crime, and was then retaliated against and wrongfully terminated when she refused to come back to work.
You know, a fun fact, Renee?
You what?
A fun fact is that employee in Dallas was an attorney. It was the general counsel for a company.
And really? So you know the full story. Okay.
You're a business, you're telling your GC that they need to come in despite advising you not to. That could be a recipe for trouble.
Yes, I would agree. It's not going to look good for them. It may not pan out very well. Recently, there was another issue in Illinois. A nurse, so talking essential workers, was terminated after she had warned some of her co-employees that the masks that were being provided were not sufficient to actually, keep away the virus, protect against the virus is the word I'm looking for there. So she was terminated and has filed an EEOC claim. So I think the big lesson here, in regards, of course, to the wrongful termination, is really to take seriously any employee complaint that you receive. It may seem frivolous or small at the time it comes in, but these things can become much more protracted and more significant in terms of litigation. So if you have an employee who thinks that the PPE you are providing is insufficient, or that the sanitization policies are not correct, or there's certain policies in place or not in place to protect both the employees and the patients if it's a medical practice, you really need to take that complaint seriously, investigate it, try to get to the bottom of it before dismissing it because you don't want to find yourself in a lawsuit for wrongful termination. And we're also seeing this in terms of discrimination, because what we're seeing is that there's some complaints already coming in from those employees who are either laid off, terminated, or furloughed if they were maybe, over the age of 65 or over the age of 40, or they had some sort of ADA disability, maybe they were pregnant, and they're filing claims on the discrimination side, alleging that they were only terminated or there was only adverse action taken against them because of that factor, and that they have to be a protected class in order to actually allege this. But because there are such uncertain times and uncharted waters when it comes to these types of discrimination claims, it may be a lower bar for them, and it's going to be an uphill battle for employers to fight against these types of claims. So as you start to bring your employees back and decide actually who does come back to the office, you want to really think about a few different factors. One being, of course, your business's needs. Who is essential or critical? If you have certain employees that are just fearful to come back to the office for whatever reason, right? There are a variety of reasons that employee may not want to come back. But if they put you on notice as the employer that they don't want to return, you really need to dig a little bit deeper and work with that employee on a one-on-one basis to find out, do they have a health condition? Do they have someone that they're caring for that has a health condition? I just spoke with a client today who was ordered to come back to the office by her employer. She's a nurse, and she believes that the employer is asking her to violate the stay-at-home order, and she's caring for an elderly person. So she does not want to risk contracting the virus by going back to the office, and is fearful that she could put her license in jeopardy if she's violating an order. So these are some considerations of who do you bring back, and if you have an employee who's fearful, get to the bottom of it so you can decide what the next steps are. Do you need to accommodate that employee? Is there an interactive process you can go through? And maybe they need to be put on leave or some other action needs to be taken. And then, of course, compliance with stay-home orders. I know in Texas, everything's opening back up. Up here in Chicago, we're very jealous of that because we are still under a lockdown. So keep on checking with both your county, your municipality, and your state to make sure that if you are opening your office, that you are doing so in compliance with state order. I think that there is a lot of confusion and discrepancy in some of these governor's orders where they say elective procedures can resume. Who does that include? Who does it preclude? So checking with your stay-at-home orders as well as any executive orders is important. And then finally, thinking about those employees when you're bringing them back, that you are documenting very well those employees that you're bringing back. If there was any reason you didn't bring back an employee, keeping track of that, making sure that your employee records are really up to date in terms of who's coming back, and if they're not, why. Because I think the number one thing to remember is documentation from an employment attorney. Documentation is key, everything. So those are the things to really keep in mind as you bring employees back and try to stave off any EEOC claims or discrimination or wrongful termination lawsuits.
Awesome. And, Renee, something that I know that we've talked about before, but I think when you are trying to bring back your employees, before you bring them through, you should talk to them and communicate with them as to all the different things you've done to bring them back in, all the safety precautions that you've done, because I think there's a lot of anxiety, especially because so many of them have not been back in their offices in so long. So if they feel like they're not getting the right PPE or they feel like they're being discriminated against for whatever reason, I think the lashing out when you're fearful will happen faster than it normally would be when there's less stress put on the individuals. So I know Michael has shared a story before where one of his clients was getting ready to open up and had said, hey, let's have a call on this. And that's spending 4 hours explaining to his team all the things they've done to protect them. So I think no matter what, before they come in to help rectify any potential issues, the communications be so important on educating them everything that you've done to protect them. And then the last thing is, which I'll agree with, is if you're not protecting them and you're in the medical industry, I think it's a pretty big deal. I think you're outside of what would be considered the standard of care right now. But Michael, I don't know if you have any thoughts too.
What strikes me is that, most of our clients are really looking at, when can they open legally and how can they do so safely. And there are some traps with employment laws that kind of jump out when I listen to Renee. And for example, a client may very well deem it not appropriate to have someone 65 or older come back to work because of the CDC guidelines and the risks. And how you handle that could create some employment-related issues, because I think Renee alluded to this. I believe if you're 40 or older, that is a protected class, and so there's some other angles that you need to consider, and which really just points back to Renee's advice, which is document and proceed, cautiously.
And I would add, just to you, Brad, I completely agree with the communication aspect of bringing those employees back and letting them know everything you've done to prepare. And I think really important is to put that in writing, right? Because you can verbally communicate, but if the employee says, well, I never received any document, I got no plan or process or protocol, so I had no idea what was expected of me or what the office was doing, then you're in a he said, she said situation. So I think that it's really important to communicate with the employees and do so in writing, at least as one method. And then potentially having those employees sign an acknowledgement that they've received the updated policies and they agree with them, so that you're not on the hook as the employer.
Yeah, and for those of you who happen to be Access Plus members, as a reminder, all that information that Renee just described to you is actually in your Access Plus toolkit, so that you can have that power at your fingertips to make sure you have the right documentation. And more importantly, as Renee said, which I agree with her 100%, is not only do you educate them, but you make sure that they see it and they sign for what you provide to them. Any other follow-up thoughts, guys? Awesome. Renee, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Be safe.
See you at the next episode.